Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 158 based on novel. So let's start. What Qin Mu cultivated was the teleportation divine art of heavenly devil cult, and it was very different from the blood sacrifices used by the devil gods of the other world. Their blood sacrifice was more primitive and ancient, while the teleportation divine art of heavenly devil cult was built on space algebra. It required extremely high attainments in algebra in order to achieve it. The biggest difference in the two kinds of divine arts was that the teleportation divine art of heavenly devil cult knew what it was and the reason why, seeking a solution and reaching it. However, blood sacrifice teleportation knew what it was but did not know the reason why. It did not seek to understand, but to be convenient. This gave Qin Mu and the rest the possibility to interfere with it. Rat Immortal, bring me and Grandpa Deaf underground. I need to see the rune layout on their sacrificial altar, then I will execute teleportation divine art and Grandpa Deaf will paint it. Divine Flood Dragon King, follow me. I will need your magic power, Qin Mu quickly ordered. Grandpa Apothecary, you guys shall stay here and guard Granny Sai and Imperial Preceptor's corporeal bodies. The plan was set, and Rat Immortal immediately brought them out of Sun's ship. Don't move, I'll bring you guys underground. After he said that, he shook and transformed into a huge rat. A lump of demon wind swept Qin Mu, Deaf, and the Divine Flood Dragon King up, pulling them down into the earth. Qin Mu only felt himself traveling quickly through the ground, and not much later, his body suddenly paused. The space in front of his eyes became incomparably vast. When he looked around, he saw the majestic sight that Rat Immortal had described. A huge god statue had risen from the ground and got trapped. Wherever the incomparably thick chains converged, there were palaces holding onto them, and below, there were even more chains wrapped around a long knife stretching from the north to the south. The long knife was incomparably bright, and chained down by as if someone was afraid that it would fly away. Its length was too great though, to the point that Qin Mu couldn't imagine who could control it. When the unlucky god statue had risen, it had knocked against the blade, and its incomparably sturdy head was sliced at the heart of its brows. On the raised palm of that god statue, there were over 10 tall and sturdy stone statues hurrying to and fro to construct a huge sacrificial altar. Both they and their project were huge, but when compared to the god statue, they seemed extremely small. Of course, Qin Mu, Deaf, and the rest were even more insignificant. Qin Mu executed 9 Heaven's Eyes Awakening skill to carefully examine the runes on the sacrificial altar and memoized them. Rat Immortal brought him back and forth through the surroundings to observe it from all sides. After some time, he finally memoized all the runes. Rat Immortal, enough, Qin Mu muttered irresolutely. Let's go to that palace. I will take a break there to calculate. Rat Immortal brought them to one of the palaces, which was connected to a long floating bridge that connected to the cliffs in the distance. It seemed like there had been people living there in the past, looking after the underground space. Qin Mu stepped on firm ground and looked around. He saw that the door to the vermilion red hall was tightly locked. With his divine eyes, he saw an extremely complicated seal which made it hard to enter. Right here then. Qin Mu took out a Daotai sack and rummaged through it. He brought out all kinds of calculation tools like Wuji plate, Taiji plate, 5 elements beads, 8 trigrams plate, which made for a dazzling lineup. Even if it was the same old 8 trigrams plate, there were different structures. All the kinds of solid and broken lines could be shifted, so different structures required different tools of calculation, so he took out an extremely large number of them. He used vital chi to lift these tools of calculation up and instantly, countless calculation tools split apart in the air and reassembled themselves. The complication of the calculation made Rat immortal and Deaf dumbfounded, dazzling their eyes. After a moment, an incomparably complicated tool of calculation, that took up a radius of numerous yards appeared in the air. Binary, quaternary, centenary, octal, novennary, decimal, hexadecimal, and base 64. It had countless strange components moving along with his vital chi as crunching sounds rang out non-stop. All kind of calculus beads appeared in the sky and jumped up and down continuously. There were also cubes and cube pillars. They were sometimes long and sometimes short as they constantly progressed forward. Can you understand it? Rat immortal secretly asked Deaf. Deaf waved his hand. I can't hear you. Rat immortal didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Suddenly, Qin Mu shook his Daotai sack, and all the tools of calculation flew back inside, vanishing without a trace. The calculation is done. Grandpa Deaf, it's up to you now. Qin Mu roused his spirit and executed his vital chi. Suddenly, a set of teleportation divine art formation appeared in the sky, and all kinds of runes lighted up. Deaf raised his eyes to take a look and painted in the air. The brush moved like a dragon and snake as he quickly laid down the formation. All the rune markings were no different from Qin Mu's teleportation divine art. What he used was the technique of the painting path, and it was none other than the world in the painting technique Qin Mu had once mentioned to him. In the past, his painting path was from inside out. When he drew wind, wind would appear, and when he drew lightning, lightning would appear. But now, his painting was outside in, having a world hidden inside it. Qin Mu dispersed his teleportation divine art and executed his vital chi again. Another kind of teleportation formation then appeared in the air. Deaf painted the second teleportation formation as well. When Rat Immortal looked toward the painting, he couldn't help becoming stumped for words. Deaf had clearly painted on a flat surface, but looking in, he could see the space inside, and there was no difference from the teleportation divine art that Qin Mu had executed. Because of limitations in cultivation, the area covered by the divine art wasn't huge and the power wasn't strong. Yet even though the painting that Deaf drew didn't look huge, Rat Immortal was shocked when he looked inside it. The space in the painting was extremely vast, covering the area with a radius of a mile. Qin Mu executed the teleportation divine art again, and Deaf drew the third painting. After he was done, Qin Mu asked him to paste the third painting under his feet. Deaf was slightly stunned, not understanding the meaning of it. However, he still did it. A beam shot out from Qin Mu's eyes and went for the space above the huge knife. Grandpa Deaf, place the first painting there. Deaf flicked his brush, and the first picture flew out, landing where his gaze had fallen. It then gradually vanished without a trace. Qin Mu calculated silently for a moment and a beam of light shot out from his eyes again, landing at the abdomen of the god statue. The second painting shall be placed there. Deaf gave a huge stroke, and the second painting flew out without the slightest delay. It then also vanished without a trace. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief and smiled. This way, the devil army will be unable to teleport here with the help of the blood sacrifice sacrificial altar. Rat Immortal frowned slightly. It's going to be fine with just this. Qin Mu nodded, but Rat Immortal still wasn't at ease. Are you sure? If the devil army gets teleported and sacrifices themselves for this god statue revive, it will be an unstoppable disaster. Are you sure these two kinds of teleportation, divine art of yours will be able to disrupt their blood sacrifice sacrificial altar? Deaf also wasn't too at ease. He asked with nervousness, Mua, where will these three paintings of yours send the devil army? Qin Mu hesitated for a moment before saying, I can't alter their teleportation, just disrupt it. Rat Immortal sighed. Since it's only disruption, doesn't it mean that that army will still be transferred? Qin Mu nodded and explained, teleportation involves a shift in space, which requires very precise algebra calculations. I used two kinds of teleportation formations to disrupt the mirror images of the two sacrificial altars. Even though the extent of the disruption won't be big, but to an incomparably precise algebra calculation, even an inch of difference can be a difference of 1,000 miles. No mistake can be allowed there. As long as they activate the two sacrificial altars, they will. Human Emperor Qin, this is a no-go. Rat Immortal said resolutely. This is a huge matter regarding everyone's survival and destruction. We can't rely on just an inch of difference. I need to find Poison King to poison all the devils that are teleporting over. Follow me out of here. His demon wind swept the three people, and was about to leave the underground space, when an imposing energy crossed time and space and bombarded them from the other world. The space around them warped, and above their heads, the vast stone ceiling warped and distorted, forming a huge whirlpool. Everything in it distorted and gradually turned into a void. Incomparably bright teleportation light shone over from that whirlpool, lighting up the grand sacrificial altar that was on the god statue's palm. That light shone from the deep sky of another world, passing through Def's first painting and landing on the sacrificial altar. On that palm, stone statues stood upright. They half knelt in the surroundings of the sacrificial altar, chanting in resounding and profound devil language, as if they were speaking some incantation. At that moment, the second teleportation formation lighted up, and the incomparably bright teleportation light had a slight change. It was so small that it was hard to notice. Suddenly, countless troops of the devils appeared in the teleportation light, and tens of thousands of soldiers hurried over from the other world. It's too late. Rat Immortal felt a chill in his heart. But just as he thought that, an abnormal change happened. In the teleportation light, the bodies of countless soldiers suddenly warped and broke into pieces in the flowing light. All of those people became corpses. The teleportation light pillar became blood red, and countless life forms were screaming in agony within it, but all their actions were completely useless. While Rat Immortal was astonished, Qin Mu said, "Divine Flood Dragon King, join me." Rat Immortal immediately looked at Qin Mu, and saw him standing in the center of the third painting. The Divine Flood Dragon King attached himself to Qin Mu's back and transformed into a dragon-shaped tattoo. Qin Mu's aura rose exponentially, and his face slightly dimmed. Gate of Heaven Influence. A majestic gate appeared behind him, and the teleportation light pillars warped in his direction. The countless soldiers of the devil race passed through the gate one after another. Suddenly, a corpse flew out from the gate and landed beside his feet. It was the corpse of a devil that had transferred over. Its limbs were twisted and his head had become part of his chest. It had to be a mishap, which happened during the space teleportation. It had reassembled his body and primordial spirit, but due to the error in calculation, they were in disorder. The corporeal body had died unnaturally, while his primordial spirit was left in Yudu. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, countless corpses poured out from Gate of Heaven Influence, and in an instant, there was a corpse mountain around Qin Mu. It piled up higher and higher, filling up the hall. Everyone, please don't blame me. Suddenly, the third painting was activated, and the huge teleportation formation burst forth. Light dazzled the eyes and swept in everything around the palace. Rat Immortal and Def were teleported out, and their bodies appeared in midair. Before they could land on the ground, numerous broken limbs appeared in the sky alongside them, and a corpse rain fell on great ruins. They raised their heads, and on the other side of the teleportation light, Gate of Heaven Influence towered aloft. The eyes of the youth in front of the door were moist as he buried tens of thousands of soldiers from another world. This corpse rain lasted for an hour, and nobody could tell how many corpses had fallen. It was truly a horrifying sight. When the corpse rain stopped, Rat Immortal hurriedly brought Death back underground. There, they saw the stone statues standing motionlessly around the sacrificial altar. However, the teleportation light had already extinguished. They looked toward the palace, and saw a sapphire, blue flood dragon coiling around the roof of it with his head raised up. His long whiskers fluttered in the wind while Qin Mu stood on his head. He was currently looking at the sacrificial altar on the god statue's palm. The two of old men hurriedly passed through a long bridge to reach the palace and ascended to the roof. Death looked down and was slightly stunned. Below, even though the stone statues around the sacrificial altar were not moving, they had all raised their heads to look over with their stone eyes. Mua, what happened? Death asked nervously. They are looking at me, Qin Mu said softly. Do you think they blame me for killing their clansmen? Death shook his head. In their hearts, the army was meant for sacrifice, so even if they hadn't died at your hands, they would have been sacrificed, so you don't have to trouble yourself with that. On the contrary, you stopped them from awakening the god statue, and that's a good thing. It saved the people of Eternal Peace Empire. Qin Mu looked straight at him. Grandpa Deaf, I have never killed so many people before. Maybe many people had died because of me, but to kill so many of them personally, I'm still a little shaken. When the devil soldiers were teleported, some of them were already dead. There were some that weren't, but after entering Gate of Heaven influence, they were. I counted and there were over 10,000 people. I have never personally killed so many people before. In Gate of Heaven influence, I saw numerous paper boats floating in the darkness. The messengers of death sat on them to guide the primordial spirits of all the people I had just killed. Death was stumped for words and didn't know how to console him. After a moment, he said, when I was still the crown prince of heavenly painting country, I woke up from seclusion to see my country having been wiped out. I walked alone through the palace, and saw the streets littered with corpses. Because the resistance was too intense, the invading country, military wolf country, had suffered great losses. To vent his anger, their ruler ordered to massacre the city. He stared blankly ahead, as if he had yet to walk out from the shadow that event had cast. He stayed silent for a moment before continuing. I saw father and mother's heads hanging on the palace doors, saw the corpses of the concubines and elderly ladies. Some soldiers even plucked father's head down to lift it up with spears, showing it off everywhere. I ran onto the street, and saw the soldiers of military wolf country pillaging everywhere, beheading anyone they liked and raping the women. I came to my crown prince manor to find my wife and children dead, my daughter trampled by a war horse. He stared with eyes wide open, seeming to have come back to that dark period of time. In the depths of his eyes, the sight of heavenly painting country being destroyed seemed to remain, and it was hell in the mortal world. I was drunk on calligraphy and painting, drunk on the painting path, and didn't care about the country affairs. I tore my ears off then. Since I didn't listen to the affairs of the world, what good were those ears? I used the corpses of the people as brush and the blood that filled the street as paint. I turned that place into hell. The army of military wolf country was dragged into hell, their army of million people was buried there by me. But so what? My homeland will never return, the dead will not revive. And so I went to hide in great ruins. Death raised his head and looked at Qin Mu. He lifted a finger and tapped him on his heart. Mua, steal your heart and don't be like me, only becoming ruthless after your home is destroyed. By then, it's too late. This is a battlefield, and there's no right or wrong. On the battlefield, your heart is hell, your heart is Yudu. Qin Mu's head suddenly became clear and he bowed. I've benefited from your advice. Death smiled and said, this sin that plagues you, let Earth Count take care of those people after they die. Our mission is to send more enemies to see him. Qin Mu laughed loudly. Send them to see Earth Count. Rat Immortal looked at the stone statue below and asked, "What happened to the stone statues?" "I don't know, they suddenly stopped moving." Qin Mu was also somewhat puzzled. "They are very strong. Because their bodies petrified, they became abnormally hard. Since their sacrifice failed, they will most likely do something again. They won't give up so easily." Suddenly, the stone statues around the sacrificial altar jumped into the abyss below. Qin Mu hurriedly looked down and saw them tunneling into the ground, disappearing from his sight. "This?" The three of them looked at each other in dismay. Then Qin Mu moved his gaze to the knife above the god statue's head. It was incomparably bright, and seemed like to have sliced the statue's head off without any effort, almost splitting the god statue apart. The surface of the divine knife was incomparably smooth, without any veins to be seen. It was brighter and purer than the brightest mirror in the world. The primordial spirit of Granny Sai, eternal peace imperial preceptor, mute, butcher, and the rest seemed to be on its flat surface, fighting with the gods of high heavens, but unable to see the sight outside. Suddenly, grey fog poured over and filled the entire underground space. The group watched it become denser and denser. Mountains and rivers flooded over in the fog and drowned them out. Not only that, even the god statue, which had popped out from underground, and the bright long knife was drowned out as well. Only the chains were faintly discernible. After a moment, the fog stopped flowing in, and white bone mountains appeared. They were incomparably majestic, and the underground space filled with the white bones crawling all over them. It looked sinister and terrifying. The living realm of the dead. Qin Mu's heart trembled violently, and he looked into the depths of the fog. At the deepest part of the fog, there was a dock which was the only path into the living realm of the dead. It and Fengdu had come to the underground of God-broken mountain range, overlapping with the strange underground space. "Who has Fengdu coins?" Qin Mu asked in a hurry. Rat Immortal and Deaf had never seen this sight before and shook their heads. The divine Flood Dragon King was a god of high heavens, so he naturally wouldn't have Fengdu coins, either. At this moment, a tattered ship sailed over through the sea of fog, and Qin Mu raised his hand to wave while shouting, "Boatman, can you give us a lift?" The oar creaked as the boat sailed over from the skeleton mountains. Qin Mu was beyond excited, while Rat Immortal and Deaf looked as though they were going to face a great enemy, as they stared nervously at the tattered boat. After a moment, it came to the front of the palace and floated in front of the divine Flood Dragon King's huge head, looking to be very small. The boatman wore a woven rush raincoat and a bamboo hat which covered his face. The divine Flood Dragon King hung his head down, and Qin Mu was about to jump into the boat, when a white bony palm stretched out from under the woven rush raincoat. A sinister voice came from under the bamboo hat. "Little friend, do you have money?" Qin Mu shook his head. "The treasured boat doesn't ferry guests with no money," the boatman said. "I'm just doing a small business. When you have the money, it won't be late for you to enter Fengdu." Qin Mu was disappointed. Suddenly, he saw that the white bony palm only had 4 fingers. One of its fingers had been chopped off, and it was most likely a sword wound. His body trembled violently, as he followed the boatman leaving into the distance with his eyes, until he vanished into the depths of the sea of fog. "When did Fengdu change their boatman?" Qin Mu asked in a shout. A sinister voice came from the sea of fog, but what was weird was it actually held a hint of happiness. "The day I died, it changed the boatman. Have you seen Heavenly Devil Patriarch? He, when you have the money, why don't you come over to take a look?" Qin Mu stared blankly into the distance. Rat Immortal was beyond bewildered and asked, "Human Emperor Qin, you recognize that ghost?" Qin Mu nodded. "He seems to be an old friend, which only had 9 fingers. That missing one had been chopped off by village chief. You're saying his Ling Jing?" Rat Immortal instantly came to realization, becoming delighted and surprised. He also shouted loudly, "Senior brother Ling Jing, do you still remember me?" No reply came from the sea of fog. Rat Immortal called out a few more times, but there was no reply. It left him disappointed and frustrated. Suddenly, the fog moved once more and flowed away to the west, where it quickly vanished without a trace. Qin Mu raised his head and saw that the divine blade was still on the head of the god statue. It was still incomparably bright, but there was no Granny Sai and the rest within it. Granny Sai and the rest were snatched away by Fengju. Qin Mu was astonished, but he immediately rushed out of the earth's surface with Rat Immortal and Deaf. Suddenly, the bright light shone into their eyes, stinging them. The sun was rising in the east, and its first rays had shone onto their faces. Behind them, the darkness of great ruins was rapidly retreating. That's where the corpses of over 10,000 soldiers fell. Deaf pointed to some place in great ruins and said to Qin Mu, "You teleported them 100 miles or so." Qin Mu activated Fire Heaven's eyes to look over, and saw a mountain of white bones. The 10,000 or so soldiers of the devil race only had their bones left. Both their flesh and blood were gone, having already been swallowed by the monsters of great ruins. The white bone mountain was also shined on by sunlight, and looked very strange. Qin Mu turned around and walked toward Sunship. "My heart is hell, who cares about the overflowing sins?" Deaf smiled and walked after him. Near Sunship, the sky full of stars formed by great overarching heavenly stars was starting to rapidly dim. The woman who had laid it out her eyes and fell from midair. Qin Mu immediately increased his speed, planning to catch that woman. Another person fell from the air while crying out in a weak voice, "Abba, Abba." Qin Mu hesitated for a moment, his arms going left and right. But at that moment, Blind also began falling down head first, so Qin Mu rushed toward him in a hurry. "Mua, are you going to see me and old Ma fall to our deaths?" Butcher asked loudly. Qin Mu looked over and saw the two grandpas also falling from the sky. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He really didn't know who to catch. As for Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and Queen Yi, who was falling down as well, Qin Mu didn't have any plans to catch them. Hu Linga rushed out from Sunship and shouted, "Maha! Maha! Maha! Maha!" A bunch of flood dragons rushed out from her side like wind and caught everyone who was falling down. Qin Mu finally let out a sigh of relief and wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. Thump! In the distance, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor crashed on the ground, and Qin Mu jumped in shock. He hurriedly looked at the flood dragon, who was supposed to catch him, and couldn't help becoming stunned. That flood dragon was carrying Earthquake Cauldron and crying out "Maha Maha," while happily running back to Sunship with the other flood dragons. It had absolutely no idea that it had caught the wrong thing. In Eternal Peace Capital City, Qin Mu was examining the true god stone statue, which had tunneled out from underground. 3 months had passed since the crisis of High Heavens. During that time, everyone who had been injured had undergone treatment. With apothecary taking care of them personally, everyone recovered pretty fast. Hermit Qingyu returned to Little Jade Capital, but he would come back from time to visit everyone. Rat Immortal and Fox Immortal brought Willow Immortal, Yellow Immortal, and White Immortal's ashes back to Willow Prefecture. King Kuan and Queen Yi brought Xian Shengwu's tortoiseshell to the Black Tortoise people overseas, sending him back to his clan. Elder of Discipline also brought over young Patriarch's ashes, burying them under the sacred tree. Qin Mu had personally sent Old Dao Master's corpse to Dao Sect, while Old Ma welcomed Old Rulai's corporeal body back to Great Thunderclap Monastery, inviting him into 10,000 Buddha's pagoda. Tuxing Feng was also among the casualties, but he had buried himself and his opponent deep in the magma underground. Hermit Qin Mu took a trip underground and saw a woman that was almost as tall as Tuxing Feng and who was his widow. She paid her respects at where Tuxing Feng had died in battle and said to Qin Mu, "Earth travelers will never go back on the promise made back then. When human emperor summons us again, there will still be men to come and join you." After the battle, God-broken mountain range had vanished and the darkness had invaded Eternal Peace Empire. Qin Mu went to check on the flag he had stabbed into the ground and saw that the darkness was not spreading. That made him more or less at ease. As for the huge hole that was blown in God-broken mountain range by earthquake cauldron, it had still not vanished. The situation in the other world could still be seen. The devils in that world were busy preparing something once more. The stone statues moving around the ruins of God-broken mountain range would show up from time to time, and there were devils frequently popping out from somewhere. Imperial Preceptor had ordered the college scholars of all lands to go there for experience. They were to get rid of the scattered devils that popped out, which resulted in many adventurers there every day. The devils from the other world found it very hard to regain their power. Everything in Eternal Peace Empire returned back to normal, and the commotion caused by the stone statues and abnormal treasures slowly died down. However, the huge and majestic true god statues still stood upright like mountains. They didn't vanish. The stone statue in front of Qin Mu was one of them. It stood tall and upright, overlooking the capital city in front of it. The stone statue was so tall that even if it couldn't move, it still attracted many foolish people to pay respect to it and offer incense. Qin Mu raised his head to examine it. His thoughts were like the clouds in the sky, gathering and dispersing. "You know it, these stone statues will revive and destroy the world sooner or later," said Xu Xinghua, and Qin Mu turned around. He saw the youth who was about his age carrying his luggage. Jingyang followed beside him, and she also carried a tiny bag. Xu Xinghua came to his side and examined the stone statue. The natural disaster did not come and the fate of humankind will continue. There will still be war. Even if you prevented high heavens from doing their task, there will still be numerous people dying every day, and they will be used as sacrifices by the god statues. One day, they will accumulate enough power to awaken, destroying this world. Qin Mu continued to examine the stone statue with a calm expression. "I know, Imperial Preceptor knows, and Village Chief also knew it, but we had no choice but to do that. The longer we drag this out, the stronger eternal peace will become. In the past, we didn't have the power to fight back, so it was easy for them to crush us, but given enough time, we can grow until the difference between us won't be so vast." Village Chief felt this way, and Imperial Preceptor felt that way too. He looked toward Xu Xinghua and revealed a pure smile. "As long as we live, there's hope, isn't there?" His smile was very infectious, and Xu Xinghua couldn't help smiling as well. Jingyang felt a weird feeling rising in her heart. Xu Xinghua was an abnormally serious person and rarely smiled, yet every time he met Qin Mu, he would be infected by him. Heavenly Devil Cult Master really possessed abnormal magic. Xu Xinghua took out a bag of money and smiled. "I've come here to pay back the debt, and also to take my leave. This is the money I owe you. As I return it to you, I'm also saying my farewell." Qin Mu was slightly stunned. He took the money bag and said, "Brother Xu earns money pretty fast, eh?" Xu Xinghua smiled. "I had taken a big job. The spirit weapons I forged gained some reputation, so when the Emperor summoned all the able craftsmen in the world to restore mysterious pearl crossbows, I had gone as well. At that time, only I was able to restore it and offer a blueprint to the army, thus the Emperor rewarded me with a big sum of money." "When do you plan to go?" Qin Mu asked. Xu Xinghua tightened the strap of his luggage and walked away with Jingyang toward the dock. "I came to Eternal Peace to kill you. After that, I was supposed to return to high heavens to continue cultivating in silence. However, after meeting you, I felt that journeying through eternal peace was a better training for my frame of mind. Qin Mu followed him. The dock was very far, and the two of them were starting to walk differently. They were contesting in secret again. This video will end here.